Robert Alton Harris, was born 3 months premature after his mother was kicked so brutally in the abdomen by an angry husband that she began hemorrhaging. Both parents inflicted frequent beatings, the father with his fists, causing a broken jaw when Robert Alton Harris was not yet 2. Sitting at the table, if Robert reached out for something without his father's permission, he would end up with a fork in the back of his hand. Robert Harris had a violent and unhappy childhood that started in the womb. For sport, his father would load a gun and tell the children they had 30 minutes to hide outside the house, after which he would shoot them down like animals. Young Harris soon began showing anger toward animals and people. The senior Harris was jailed for sexually molesting his daughters, while the mother smoked and drank herself to death. Robert Alton Harris was born on January 15, 1953, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Harris was born in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and was abused as a child. He had run-ins with police as early as age 10, and was first placed into juvenile detention at age 13 for stealing a car. His mother abandoned him at age 14, and he was soon after placed into juvenile detention after stealing another car. Following his release, he found work, married, and had a son. In 1975, he was imprisoned for manslaughter and paroled in January 1978. Sometime in May or June 1978, Robert, then aged 25, asked his brother Daniel, 18, for help in planning a bank robbery. On July 2nd, Daniel stole 2 guns from a neighbor's house in Visalia, California, and the two drove to San Diego that night. They spent the next 2 days purchasing ammunition and practicing the robbery in a rural area near Miramar Lake. On July 5th, the Harris brothers happened upon John Mieski and Michael Baker, both 16, sitting in a green Ford Limited eating cheeseburgers in a supermarket parking lot in Mira Mesa. Mieski and Baker were best friends who had planned to spend the day fishing to celebrate Mieski's newly acquired driver's license. Robert Harris commandeered Mieski's car and ordered him to drive to Miramar Lake, with Daniel Harris following in another vehicle. Robert Harris told the boys that they would be using the vehicle to rob a bank, but that no one would be hurt. At Miramar Lake, the Harris brothers ordered the boys to kneel, whereupon the boys began to pray. Robert told the boys to quit crying and die like men, then shot both boys multiple times. The Harris brothers then returned to Robert's Mira Mesa home and allegedly finished the victims' half-eaten cheeseburgers while Robert boasted about the killings. About an hour later, the Harris brothers robbed the Mira Mesa branch of the San Diego Trust and Savings Bank located across the street from where they had abducted Mieski and Baker, and fled with about $2,000. A witness to the robbery followed the Harrises to their home and notified police. The Harris brothers were arrested less than an hour after the robbery. One of the officers who apprehended the Harris brothers was Stephen Baker, father of victim Michael Baker, who at the time was unaware that his son had been killed, let alone by one of the men he was arresting. The San Diego County District Attorney's Office filed felony charges of auto theft, kidnapping, murder and burglary against Robert Harris, while the U.S. Attorney's Office filed bank robbery charges against him. Harris pleaded guilty to a federal charge of bank robbery and received a 25-year sentence. On March 6, 1979, Robert Harris was convicted in the San Diego County Superior Court of 2 counts of murder in the first degree with special circumstances as well as 2 counts of kidnapping, and was sentenced to death. Daniel Harris was convicted of kidnapping and sentenced to 6 years in state prison. He was released in 1983. Harris' death sentence was affirmed by the Supreme Court of California in 1981. In 1982, the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit granted a writ of habeas corpus relieving Harris of the death sentence, vacating a contrary district court order. The Supreme Court of the United States reimposed Harris' death sentence in Pulley v. Harris, reversing the Ninth Circuit by a vote of 7-2. On Tuesday, April 21, 1992, 39-year-old Robert Alton Harris was put to death in the gas chamber at San Quentin Prison in California's first execution for 25 years. He had been sentenced to die for the particularly brutal killing of 2 teenage boys in 1978 whose car he had hijacked for use in a bank robbery. For his last meal, Harris requested and was given 2 large pizzas, a bucket of fried chicken, and ice cream. At 6:01 a.m., Harris was escorted into the gas chamber. The execution order was given at 6:07 a.m. The execution had originally been scheduled for 12:01 a.m., half an hour after the first stay was overturned, but was then postponed for nearly 4 hours while courts considered applications, claiming that execution by lethal gas was cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment to the Constitution. On that issue, a federal judge ruled that the execution had to be filmed to see the extent of Harris's suffering, and a camera was mounted on a tripod outside the gas chamber. The execution was rescheduled for 4:01 a.m. Shortly before 3 a.m., he got dressed in new jeans and a blue prison shirt. He was strapped into one of the 2 chairs in the gas chamber, and had been waiting for 12 minutes for the execution to be carried out when an unexpected call came through saying a U.S. appellate judge had granted a further stay. Some of the 49 official witnesses, who included 12 reputable citizens selected by the warden, spoke of their horror and astonishment as Harris was unbuckled and led away by guards. 4 stays of execution had been granted and overturned in 9 hours. But the Supreme Court finally issued an unprecedented order that no further stay would be valid unless issued by the court itself. Shortly before 6 a.m., Harris was again led back to the chamber. He was described as looking resigned to his fate, and was fully cooperative with the guards who led him the 15 paces from his cell. He was strapped into the metal chair, and a stethoscope taped to his chest. The door was closed and sealed, and at 6:05 a.m., he began breathing deeply, staring ahead and attempting to mouth the words "It's all right" and "I'm sorry." At 6:07, a prison official operated the lever, slowly lowering the pellets of cheesecloth-wrapped sodium cyanide into the small vat of sulfuric acid beneath the chair to create the lethal hydrocyanic gas. Harris took a number of deep breaths and for several minutes appeared to gasp and twitch convulsively. His head snapped back and then dropped as he strained against the straps. After a minute, his hands seemed to relax. His mouth was open and his face flushed and turning blue. 3 minutes later, there was a cough and a convulsion. At 6:21 a.m., 11 minutes after the start, Warden Daniel Vasquez declared Robert Alton Harris dead. After the execution, the exhaust fan is switched on to remove the hydrocyanic gas, and then the dead body is sprayed with liquid ammonia to neutralize any remaining gas. The last stage in the process is Procedure 769, in which staff wearing gas masks and rubber gloves remove the body, having first ruffled the hair to ensure that no gas is trapped in it. Harris's last words, quoting a Keanu Reeves film, were, "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone dances with the Grim Reaper." A federal judge ordered the execution to be filmed so as to decide whether the gas chamber was a cruel and unusual punishment. When the tape was watched, the authorities decided to destroy the tape. Thank you for watching Death Row.